What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Ice Earn Podcast, the podcast talking all things PWHL. My name is Heidi. I'm a huge hockey fan, but full disclosure, I am a Fleet crew member. How are we all doing after the finals last week, this week, whatever week it is? It was somehow simultaneously more, less, and exactly as exciting as I had anticipated it to be. I feel like there were some moments where I was surprised, but overall, I really just wasn't surprised much at all. I don't know how many of you feel differently. I'm sure there will be plenty of you, but let's just hop right into it to start off. I think my main concerns going into this game one for both teams, Ottawa, obviously, their defense has been the storyline the entire time. They heavily rely on Phillips, and at a certain point, that's just going to run out. We've seen it before, year one, anybody with a certain other goalie. And so that was a big concern for me when the team in front of a goalie doesn't step up and just relies on their goalie too much. That's a lot to ask, and it again, has to run out at some point. And the Victoire, I didn't have too many concerns about them, to be honest. It was more of a question of who's going to be scoring for them. Will it be that top line, the Wives line with Rock, or was it going to be depth scoring? And it really was a toss-up at the time. I think we got a decent mix, but a very healthy dose of top line contributions here. Game one, in my opinion, was the most even game that we saw for the entire series. Obviously, in the end, the shots on goal were pretty almost bang on, 25 and 26 for Ottawa and Montreal, respectively. So it doesn't get a ton more even than that. And that's kind of reflected also in the shot map. The Victoire let up many more high danger chances than they have historically been known to, especially against a team like Ottawa, who they're not bad offensively, obviously, but they're not always the best at getting in behind defenses like that, especially one like Montreal. So in that respect, going to overtime completely makes sense here. This, again, I think was Ottawa's best game, as it was the most even, and I think Montreal overall was the better team, both on paper and in practice for the most part. So the fact that Ottawa looked like they may have been taking game one, with 30 seconds left in the third period was a little surprising to me, but the outcome, not surprising at all. We didn't see a single goal until the second period when Rebecca Leslie came up with it off of an ugly rebound scramble in front of Desbiens, which is one of the very few ways you're ever going to get a puck past Desbiens. Ottawa led into the third period 1-0, and we went over halfway through that third period, looking like it was going to be a 1-0 game before Abby Rock tied it up, thanks in very large part to Nadia Mativi, the late season addition. This goal was really just a microcosm of Ottawa's greater defensive issue. It was a complete defensive breakdown, blunder here. There were like 3 Ottawa players all over Mativi who was going into the corner, and somehow, someway, nobody on Abby Rock, who was gliding in towards the back of the net, not even crashing, just like unhurriedly gliding towards the back of the net, which gave Mativi a perfect outlet pass that she absolutely nailed to give Rock basically a wide open net. But once again, Rebecca Leslie gave Ottawa the lead about 3 minutes later. This one off of a rare, terrible Montreal turnover, thanks to Sarah Wisniewicz, that she sent over to Leslie, and Leslie went all the way across the crease, which forced Desbiens to open up the 5-hole for a nice low shot in the net. Now, the big drama for this first game, well, the first big drama of this first game, was when Laura Stacey went down with like 15 seconds left in the third period in what looked to be a ton of pain. She got checked into the boards. She was like basically leaning against them with her back. So she was facing the ice. So it definitely wasn't a board. There was no penalty to my eye, to the ref's eye, like literally nothing dirty about this hit at all. I think she just got hit awkwardly. It looked like maybe a knee pad had caught her, maybe on the back of the leg somewhere. Really hard to say what happened. People were speculating that maybe she dislocated her knee based on, her crumpling to the ice and unable to get up at all. She did not look like she should be walking around on that leg. She ended up being helped off the ice with maybe the tiniest bit of pressure on that leg all the way down the tunnel. It really looked like this could be series ending for her, which could have potentially changed the entire course of the series. It's not a spoiler at this point to tell you that she came back for the overtime period, seemingly no worse for wear. So I saw somebody suggest maybe it could have been something like a Charlie horse. Hearing it made a ton of sense to me because you know how just absolutely debilitating those are in the moment. They hurt like hell. You don't want to move. You don't really want to stretch that leg out. You don't want to put any pressure on it. Like, it hurts so bad. And I could absolutely see it being something that might have been a factor. But we don't really know. I don't know that we'll ever know. I don't think that it's necessarily our business to know. Of course, people were speculating on how Poulin was dealing with it mentally, which I personally think is a silly notion. Women's hockey has had to fight so much, and the players within women's hockey have had to fight so much for equality that these players all want to be seen as professionals first. As much as they might love their significant other, whether it's Poulin and Stacey or other couples throughout the league, throughout the sport, really, they want to be seen as professionals first so that they can be taken seriously. They're not going to let their interpersonal relationships bleed into their performance as much as they can help it. Those two of any women's hockey players probably have it down better than anyone else. They are seemingly masters at compartmentalization, where they can keep their work and personal lives separate despite the fact that they play on the same line for the same team. Their job is literally together. So to speculate whether Poulin was going to be distracted by Stacey going down the tunnel is just wild to me. And I don't see that happening at all. Yes, you could see that she was concerned, but I think Poulin as a player and as a teammate is concerned about every teammate who gets injured, especially one looking as severe as that. Obviously, deep down, I know she's going to have those personal feelings as well, but to suggest that she would let it affect her performance on the ice is just, I can't see it. It's not going to happen. She is much too much of a professional to let that affect her. Now, with all of that said, the Victoires were still in a bind with under 30 seconds left in the third period, down a goal. Desbiens was out of the net. She had been out of the net since, just over a minute left. And just when fans thought it was over, Nicole Gosling, the rookie, gets her first playoff goal off of a rebound that caused all kinds of chaos in front of the net. Gosling was just far enough back from the chaos to see the puck pop out and see a perfect opportunity to get it through legs into the back of the net. My hat is off to her for her poise and composure in that moment, while, again, chaos is happening right in front of her. So, of course, this pushed us to overtime, and considering the history of overtime in playoff hockey, no one was really optimistic that it was going to be a quick one. But in fact, it was. After 2 minutes and 29 seconds of play, Abby Rock scored the most unique playoff goal I think we have ever seen. Laura Stacey passed it to her from the left circle relative to Phillips, while Rock was basically back post with her stick down. It bounced off of, I think, the shaft of her stick up on her cage and right behind Phillips for the overtime game winner. There is a lot to be said for being at the right place at the right time with the right stance. She did everything correctly, and it may not have happened the way that she had envisioned it or wanted it, but she was absolutely not complaining. She already had one black eye. What was another one? Now, if you're as chronically online as I am, you might have seen that there were plenty of Ottawa fans demanding that this goal be called back. And the reason for that is that there is exactly like one frame where it looks like Marie-Philippe Poulin might have one foot still on the bench when she keeps the puck in the zone in the last couple of seconds that led up to this goal. Ottawa fans want it called back for a missed stoppage of play, but you cannot recall a goal for a missed stoppage on a penalty because this isn't like a missed hand pass. This isn't a high stick. At most, this would have been a too many players on the ice penalty if it was called at all. I didn't freeze frame every single second of this sequence to see whether or not there were 6 players on the ice or 5, but at best it would have been too many players, and that's a penalty. And you cannot recall a goal on a missed penalty. You just can't. It is not in the rule book, so you cannot do it. It's not reviewable for that. So on those grounds, it stands. And I think a lot of people were also conflating it with the unique circumstances that we saw twice in a week this season, which was playing the puck when you still have 1 foot in the penalty box. And that's a penalty because you're ineligible to play with 1 foot in the penalty box. So you just turn right back around and go back in. And that's not the same thing as the bench. So that's why that goal stands. The second game had a goal much earlier, thanks to Sarah Wisniewicz, but it looked like it might have been Gabby Hughes for a second, because this was another weird goal that actually went in the net twice. So basically, there was a scramble in front of Desbiens. Wisniewicz got a touch on it between Desbiens, who was further out of the crease, and Poulin, who was like behind Desbiens, like basically standing with her back against the crossbar. Got a touch between those two, and it actually went in the net then, but I don't think literally anybody saw it, not the players, not the refs. So they just kept like whacking at it. Hughes was basically on her knees in the crease, also whacking at it through Poulin. And I think it was Flaherty who was on the line with Poulin trying to block it. So Hughes actually gets it in the net again, and that one everyone saw and celebrated. So they called it Hughes originally. Only upon the Situation Room, I think, reviewing it, did it get changed to Wisniewicz because she was actually the one who got it in the net first. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how nobody clocked it. The 16 players who were right there, the refs who were, watching all of this go down, the lines people who have a different vantage point set further away. I have no idea how anybody missed that the first time. Players are always the first ones to point out when the puck goes in the net. So this is very strange. And despite being outshot 11-5 in the first period, the Charge were the only ones on the board going into the second, but Katie Tabin did not let that last too long. Both Clark and Stacy went to the box almost immediately in the second period, 27 seconds in. Clark for cross-checking and Stacy for unsportsmanlike conduct, which I'm not entirely sure the official reason for this, but to me, what it looked like was that she went after somebody high. I don't know if she made contact with them or not, but she definitely went for it, and it was very unnecessary. And then Clark saw this, came in and cross-checked her, knocking her over, effectively stopping the situation from occurring at all. To me, that was the funniest part. So Clark got the obvious call and immediately went to the box with the ref. And then a couple seconds later, you see Stacy just throw her head back as she is also told to go to the penalty box. It took 5 seconds for Katie Tabin to score on this 4-on-4. Montreal won the face-off, and there was kind of a fight for the puck as there usually is, but Tabin tapped it between players' legs, effectively chipping it to herself as she cut around and collected that same pass. She was completely calm as she skated through the slot and then went backhanded on the far side of Phillips for easily the prettiest goal of her career, at least from where I'm sitting. If Montreal fans who watch Tabin more closely than I do have a prettier one, let me know, but I think this one is probably top for her. This is another game where Gwyneth Phillips kept the Charge in it for as long as they were. The third period, Montreal outshot Ottawa 8-5, which isn't the biggest difference, but it was very noticeable that Montreal was playing better, just generally. Going back to shot maps, which we all know that I love these days, throughout the whole game, Ottawa had 3 shots in the slot in high danger areas, while Montreal, I think, had 8. Phillips was, standing on her head once again to keep all of those high danger shots out. And obviously, Desbiens is who she is. With fewer shots against her, she was also super solid, which meant that nobody scored in the third period, and we went back to overtime for the second game in a row. This one did not end nearly as fast. We almost made it to double overtime, but thankfully, Maggie Flaherty ended it 14-12 into overtime. This goal was another defensive breakdown by the Ottawa Charge, as Montreal had a wide open passing lane to Maggie Flaherty, who was crashing on the back door. Very, very similar goal to Mativi to Rock in the previous game. Charge fans, once again, wanted this one called back because potentially the defensive breakdown can be partially blamed on the fact that Caitlin Willoughby tripped up Emma Greco maybe 5 seconds before the goal went in. And I say again, you cannot call back a goal because of a missed penalty. It's not in the rule book. You can't do it. That's just the way that the cookie crumbles. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be able to say if Greco being on her feet maybe a second or 2 earlier would have changed the outcome of this, because Ottawa tends to really pile on Poulin. So I don't know that there wouldn't have been all 3 or 4 of those Charge players covering Poulin anyway. That's one of the biggest mistakes that you can make with the Victoire, is just assuming that it's going to be Poulin or Stacey that you have to cover 4-on-1, 3-on-1, which leads to the entire rest of the line open, and any of them can and have scored this season. In that respect, I'm really not sure that Greco being on her feet any earlier would have even made a difference. Maybe it could have blocked a passing lane, maybe, but that you can't guarantee that, and you can't call it back anyway. So all of this is just a pointless thought experiment. To me, this game is really where Ottawa's cracks showed. I think they tightened up a little bit for that first game. They held on a lot better than I maybe would have anticipated, just based on the defense that I've seen from them all season, and even in the first round. Obviously, they won that round, so it worked to a certain extent, but it's not that there weren't those cracks visible before. But this one, I think the cracks started widening. It just highlighted all of the issues that they were having already, and Phillips was doing everything that she possibly could to keep them in it, and it just wasn't enough. Now, Game 3 was, on paper, again, fairly even, but I do think that this one can be chalked up to desperation. The scoreboard was 0-0 until 7 minutes 32 seconds into the third period, so in that sense, fairly even. This was another game in which power plays had absolutely no bearing on the outcome of this game, really. Maybe a tiny bit in the third period, which I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, I think this game was lucky isn't necessarily the right word, but I think Ottawa really got through this by the skin of their teeth. Third period, it is Hayley Skamura who gets on the board first, thanks to Maureen Murphy. This was just after, maybe 3 seconds after Brooke Hobson came out of the box for a holding penalty for the Charge. Maureen Murphy took a massive slap shot that had an equally massive rebound off of the dasher boards behind Phillips that rebounded directly to Hayley Skamura, who was just about on the goal line to Phillips's right. She had just a super quick one-time touch that elevated it up and over Phillips's head. She had no chance. A beauty of a goal by Skamura. And I have to wonder if the boards at Canadian Tire Center at all were a conversation piece for the Victoire, having seen what they played like in the Boston series. I wonder if there was just any video just on these dasher boards, because it seems to me like they're a lot bouncier and springier and give up bigger rebounds than other arenas. So I do wonder if that was a factor and if that was going through Murphy's head when she took that slap shot, because I don't think that was a shot that was intended to go on Phillips. I don't think it was a missed shot. I think she was intending for it to go off of the dashers. 7 minutes later, Peyton Hemp gives Canadian Tire Center a reason to cheer as she gets her first playoff goal. A shot from Savalainen at the point was tipped on the way by Gabby Hughes, but it was tipped wide. Whether intentionally or not, it went directly to Peyton Hemp to take the one-timer past Renee Desbiens, who was diving to get over to that side of the net, but not in time. This was a goal that made me kind of feel bad about my own reaction time for a lot of things, because there was not even a second for Hemp to react to that puck redirecting the way that it did. And yet there she was for that shot, for that redirect. So tip of the hat to her there. Once again, it looked like we were going to head to overtime for the third game in a row, but less than a minute left. It was once again the hometown hero, Rebecca Leslie, that gave the Charge the edge. It was a rare defensive breakdown by Montreal that gave Wisniewicz a chance to take a shot that went off the crossbar, and it bounced out to Rebecca Leslie, who just happened to see it before everyone else and got the quick shot off. Similar to the Hemp goal in that, like a fraction of a second to respond to the change of direction for this puck and get it past a bunch of players who didn't know where the puck was. This one was actually reviewed for a missed stoppage of play, because what it looked like to me was that after it bounced off of the crossbar, Jenner tried to slap it down to the ice to her own stick, but if anything at all, only got maybe the tip of her middle finger on the puck, which really didn't change its trajectory at all. Maybe it made it spin a little bit more. And this is just my view of it. So maybe obviously the spin can make it go in all sorts of different directions depending on how it lands and whatever, and a lot of math involved there. But I don't think the Central Situation Room is really looking at that. And so the fact that it was called a goal on the ice makes a big difference here, as to me, there is not enough evidence that Jenner got anything on that puck at all to be able to definitively overturn that goal, which made complete sense when the goal stood and Ottawa took this win in the end. This game, retrospectively, had the last vestiges of Ottawa's puck luck, if you want to call it that. In many ways, this felt like death throes, those last final thrashes before something gives up, the last big push of energy, the last ditch efforts to make it out alive. And I think maybe they had used up all of the gas that they had left in the tank. Let's see if I can throw any more metaphors in that sentence. Montreal was like a python that had Ottawa in its grip. And this game was Ottawa thrashing around so much that Montreal had lost their grip just the tiniest bit that allowed Ottawa to breathe for a little bit longer. But then we went to Game 4. If Game 3 was Ottawa's death throes, this game was their final breath. In fairness to them, they were putting up a good fight. They had a ridiculous percentage of face-off wins, 71-28. Just obscene differential there. So it's not like they were completely throwing in the towel, but I think all of the issues that they had were too much to overcome. And I will give you my last reasoning once we get through it. But I think there was one more factor that played a huge part in this game for Ottawa. We didn't see a goal until 3 minutes, 49 seconds into the second period. On one of the most innocent looking shots of this series, it redirected off of Rory Gilday, the defender's stick, and that made it go 5-hole on Gwyneth Phillips. And you really cannot blame Phillips at all for that one. It was just a freak redirect. She couldn't have predicted that. Gilday, I don't know that I would say that her defensive posture was textbook, but it wasn't completely out of the norm and it wasn't egregious. It was just the shoe was on the other foot when it came to puck luck, I guess. It stayed a 1-goal game until almost halfway through the third period. after Marie-Philippe Poulin had taken a goalie interference penalty, putting the Victoire on the penalty kill for the third time that game. And notably, Ottawa did not take a single penalty, which was strange. On that penalty kill, there was a turnover in the Victoire end that led to Rock taking the puck all the way down the ice, out-skating Brienne Jenner. She leaned in, crossed the crease, and popped it backhanded behind Gwyneth Phillips in a wild sequence of events. A beauty of a finish. Rock is not known to be the fastest skater. I don't think Jenner is any slouch herself. If I had to say head-to-head, I would guess that Jenner would probably win 9 times out of 10 against Abby Rock. But this was that 10th time. My guess is that Jenner had been on the power play, her shift, for way too long and just didn't have the gas to keep up with Rock, who I don't know where that juice came from. Maybe she was fresh on the ice. I wasn't really paying attention that closely. But it wasn't a good look for Jenner, nor Clark, who was actually behind this play, more or less to prevent any passes that Rock would make. So, it was a very strange sequence that led to the one and only goal scored on a special teams unit, and it was a shorty. It was a jailbreak goal. The entire series, this was the only special teams goal, and it was a penalty kill. After that one, I think you could really see Ottawa deflate in certain ways. They continued to outshoot Montreal in this period. Montreal only ended up getting 4 shots on net this whole period, while Ottawa got 13. So obviously they were still fighting, but I don't think the belief was in them anymore. Obviously you got to keep throwing stuff at the net, but I don't think the belief was behind them anymore. And it really didn't help when just about 4 minutes later, Maggie Flaherty made it 3-0. Derek Gregg passed it up to the blue line from Flaherty to DiGirolamo, back to Flaherty for a slapper that went high blocker side on Phillips that she was pissed about missing. That was a goal that she could have made. Like any other night, I think she could have made that save. It's also interesting because she's the only goalie in the league to catch right-handed, as I recall. So shooting on that side can be very effective. And in this case, it was. But yeah, just not even maybe one of Flaherty's best shots, which is odd to say because Flaherty isn't necessarily known as a goal-scoring defender. Also very happy for friend of the show, Jess DiGirolamo, to get a playoff point here. And the final nail in the coffin came less than 2 minutes later, thanks to the Swede, Lena Ljungblom, unassisted. Off of a turnover by Jenner, Ljungblom snagged it, dragged it all the way across the top of the crease and tucked it in between the post and Phillips's skate to get that 4-0 last goal. At this point, it just felt like a slaughter. This was not pretty. This was not a pretty way to end the series. Obviously, competitive in some ways, but also not competitive at all on the scoreboard. I think some of that can be attributed to the fact that this, in my opinion, was Anne-Renee Desbiens' most impressive game of the series. Not that I think she was bad at any of the games that she played, but this one had some impressive stops at key moments that she hadn't made 100% of in the previous games. So, and I can't explain to you where that extra gear came from or why we didn't see it for the rest of the series. Maybe it was fatigue, maybe it was adrenaline. Who's to say? By contrast, I think this was Gwyneth Phillips's worst game by far, which unfortunately is understandable. She'd been standing on her head for the entire regular season and then again in playoffs. She was playing behind a team whose defense only showed up like 40% of the time that they played. She's only one person. She can only do so much. She is obviously world-class, one of the best in the world. But even then, a person is still a person. She's not made out of energy. She's not infallible. She was going to start getting tired eventually. And I think this was it. I think fatigue had really gotten to her. The schedule isn't as brutal as other, tournaments or leagues are, but it's still gotta be exhausting to make some massive saves night after night after night without a night off. I mean, you have a night off in between games, so you play off play, but maybe had Ottawa utilized Ahla in game 2, things could have been different. Maybe she would have been more well rested so that when they squeaked out the win in game 3 to go to game 4, Phillips would have played at her absolute best. But instead, she had 12 out of 16 stops, which is abysmal for her. For those who, like me, are not great at math, that is a 0.750 save percentage, 75%, as compared to the regular season where her average was 0.931. Horrific in comparison. The only game in the postseason where she came close to that number was game 1, where she had a 0.885. And even then, that's much better. It's not good, but it's better than 75. I think that was a big contributing factor, and it's just unfortunate that it happened to be on the same night that Desbiens was playing her best game. I think overall, Ottawa did tighten up their defense just a bit to start, but they really couldn't hold on to it. They couldn't maintain it, and that was their doom. As I have said since the start of playoffs, that would be what would bite them in the end. I think game 3, luck had something to do with it. Obviously, positioning and all have factored in well as well. But had Jenner gotten a touch more on that puck on the last Leslie goal, this series easily could have been done in 3 games as a sweep for Montreal. It was not a close series, despite the fact that it was like 1 goal. I don't think that it was. I didn't question it at all who was winning the series, to be honest with you. They ran out of gas. They ran out of Phillips. She couldn't bail them out any longer. And the fact that they got through game 3, honestly, was almost a miracle. On the other hand, Montreal was exactly the team that I knew them to be, as we knew them to be. They were the most consistent team all season long. And that just carried them right over into playoffs. They were so consistent night in, night out. You pretty much knew exactly what you were going to get, what you were going to see. And despite the fact that I don't really like Corey Chevry all that much, I have to give her a lot of credit because she very clearly learned from the first 2 years, both in the regular season and in playoffs. We saw her go from really heavily relying on Poulin and Stacey and whatever other player they had on that line with them for every single night and most goals to a team that was incredibly balanced by comparison. Obviously, that top line was going to get more minutes no matter what, but it wasn't nearly as dramatic as it has been in previous years. So, for example, in Game 4, the only player on the entire Victoire roster who had single-digit minutes of ice time was Natalie Mlinkova, which I have people who can tell you is a gigantic mistake to use her that little. But besides the point, that is the most spread out, even time on ice that I think I have ever seen from Corey Chevry. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that they were, so far ahead. Looking back at all 4 games, Game 3 was really the only one where the Victoire lines were more significantly skewed. The other 3 had most players, save for maybe 2 at most per game, in double digits of ice, which, looking back at Year 1 playoffs, Game 1, Montreal had 3 separate players with 0 time on ice. And as a reminder, this game almost went to double overtime. This game ended at 14:25 in the first overtime. Leah Lum, Jillian Dempsey, and Alexandra Poznikov all had 0 time on ice. She didn't use an entire 4th line. Meanwhile, this year, only 1 player in Game 4 of the final had less than double-digit time on ice. So, all that to say, for all that I may not like Corey Chevry, I have to give her props for her growth there. The last point on this game that I have is the fact that they gave the playoff Ilana Kloss MVP award to Marie-Philippe Poulin. And even Marie-Philippe Poulin was not convinced that she was the one who deserved that title. She had 8 points in playoffs, 2 goals, 6 assists. Now, granted, a couple of those assists were primary in game winners, but I think she has a great point when she said post-game that Desbiens was her MVP, which I think is a great argument. She's a top candidate for me, who I would have said was MVP. She was 1.4 goals against average and had a 944 save percentage. Fantastic numbers there. Other options for MVP over Poulin, in my opinion, would have been Abby Rock, who had 4 goals, 4 assists. Granted, all 4 of those goals were in this series. She also had 7 blocked shots in playoffs alone. Laura Stacey would be another great candidate with 3 goals, 4 assists, and 8 blocked shots. And Flaherty, as much as it pains me to say, was another candidate who had 3 goals, 1 assist, but 15 blocked shots. So Poulin wasn't bad. I don't think that she played bad at all, but I also don't think she was even close to the MVP. Had this Game 4 gone any better for Ottawa, I think, depending on the ending score, Phillips would have been another consideration, and Rebecca Leslie would have been another obvious consideration. Leslie was one of the few who could seemingly score, especially in the finals, and obviously Phillips has been standing on her head for months and months on end, so she's always a conversation as to who's the MVP on the Ottawa Charge. That's that on that. I think the award gave me a little bit of a flashback to the first year of finals where Aaron Frankel was very rudely snubbed for playoff MVP. Overall, who cares? Congratulations to the Montreal Victoire for a hard-earned win. I don't necessarily love every team. I'm not that kind of sports fan, but I do have to appreciate when a team overcomes the demons that they had been facing previously, and it's obviously only been 2 years, but 2 years, 2 first-round exits, and then this year they finally get it done. It's very nice to see, and as I said, with respect to Chevry, the growth has been really nice to see. Now, that's not all that I have for this episode. We had one more announcement as to expansion teams for next season. This one had been rumored for quite a while, so it wasn't a surprise to those of us who are chronically online. But to those who are not, the expansion to San Jose, California may have been a surprise to you. Their colors are going to be orange, blue, and white. From their press release saying it was inspired by the San Jose flag, but it was also a nod to the region's historic orange groves, while the blue evokes a beauty of California's ocean coastline and sky. Personally, the shade of orange that they picked with that shade of blue looks more like a sunset to me than it does an orange fruit and the ocean. But whatever the case, I do love it. I love orange and blue as a color combination, especially those shades are just so satisfying for some reason. So I'm all for it. PWHL San Jose will be playing at the SAP Center in San Jose, obviously, also known as the Shark Tank, as that is where the NHL's San Jose Sharks play. They'll also be sharing a training facility with them, which is great. This was probably a surprise to those of you who are not chronically online because it's another untested market. My husband is from the North Bay area. I don't know the area nearly as well as a native, but I have heard a ton about it, and I think this makes sense from a business perspective and a hockey perspective, even if it's not necessarily the PWHL perspective. It's a NHL-sized arena, so 16,000+ seats, with plenty of availability because the Sharks are the only professional sports team that play there. The Golden State Warriors from the NBA and the Valkyrie from the WNBA play more north in the Bay. So it's really just concerts and the Sharks that the PWHL will be fighting in terms of scheduling. So that makes perfect sense. They're sharing their training facility, which is huge. Training facilities were a massive factor in the PWHPA wanting to, have this kind of league where they can have their own dedicated facility that is, professional quality and not just like some high school gym type thing. There's also a huge women's sports presence in the area. I already mentioned the WNBA Golden State Valkyries. They have a big draw, as well as the NWSL Bay FC, who sold out their host of the NWSL Championship last year. I want to say that's like 30,000 women's soccer fans. So that's awesome. They have a great attendance regularly at their own stadium, which is in San Jose. So it's a great market for women's sports generally. And an additional factor that maybe this is my projection here, maybe this isn't even something they were necessarily thinking a ton about, but San Jose also has great transit options. This greater metropolitan area of the Bay Area of California is millions and millions and millions of people. It is a huge market, and it also has some solid public transportation. My husband is a huge transit guy. He loves BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit, which has a line that goes from San Francisco all the way down to San Jose. Granted, the BART stop is like 4 miles away from SAP Center, so it would be another bus ride there. But that's like a 90-minute journey-ish with the bus and the train from downtown San Francisco. Likewise, there's also Caltrain that has a train every 30 minutes that'll get you from San Francisco to San Jose in between 60 and 90 minutes, depending on whether you're taking the express service or the regular service. And that one spits you out right across the street from the SAP Center, which makes it perfect for those coming from not just San Francisco, but also Oakland. Oakland, just a little bit further up the road, is another market that unfortunately has been stripped of all of its major sports at this point. So hopefully people in and around the Oakland area are able to get down to games too. But all of that to say, this system gives so many people public transportation access to games that this could be one of the most highly attended teams in the league. We'll see how that goes, and we'll see if I'm just, blowing smoke because I have personal connections to the Bay Area, but who knows? I think it goes without saying that since my husband is from the Bay Area, this is going to be my second team. Based off of the next news, we'll see if that is a good thing or a bad thing for my mental health. As this week, the last week and a half-ish, the league has slowly been rolling out announcements as to who will be the general managers for these 4 expansion teams. Detroit came first. They are going to be managed by Manon Rheaume, who is best known as the only woman to play in the NHL. It was an exhibition game for the Tampa Bay Lightning. She was a goalie. Most recently, post-playing career, she spent 4 seasons working with the LA Kings in their hockey operations department. So she has had some front office experience, and she's a huge name in women's hockey. If you're new to the sport, you may have even heard of her. She's just that big of a name. Las Vegas was next, and this name was completely unfamiliar to me. Dominique Didia. Most recently, she co-headed the women's hockey division of CAA Sports, which is a player agency. And before that, she spent 9 years as director of marketing and content publicity with the LA Kings. So she has some more legal background and marketing background. Obviously still familiar with hockey, very familiar with the sport of hockey. So nothing new there, but I'm very interested to see how that goes. I have a feeling she's going to want to hire a player's coach if her background gives anything away. Hamilton was the third to announce their hire, and Megan Duggan. And personally, I was very excited about this one as she is a native Masshole. She's from Danvers, Massachusetts, and she is best known for her time on the U.S. women's national hockey team. She won 1 Olympic gold, 2 Olympic silver with the team. She won 7 women's world championships and 1 women's world championship silver. She was captain of the team from 2013-14 season to 2017-2018. She played so many seasons of hockey with the Boston Blades in all of their varying, leagues. And she spent the last 5 years as director of player development for the New Jersey Devils. I love Duggan. I've followed her on social media for years, probably more years than I've really paid attention to women's hockey aggressively. So I'm very happy for her. And I'm only sad that she's going to a Canadian market, I guess. Now, San Jose is a bit of an outlier and kind of a weird one here because it was announced that Troy Ryan would be acting as both general manager and head coach. To be straight up honest with you, the first time I read this, just completely glazed over head coach. So I was hearing all of this like concern about how he's going to be both the GM and the head coach. He's going to be his own boss. There's not going to be anybody else to go to in the organization if there's an issue. And I was like, why are we freaking out about this? I doubt he's going to want to do double duty. Well, turns out I just can't read, and he apparently is. Now, I can't come up with a good reason as to why he would want to do this, nor why the league would want to do this. To me, GM and coaching are similar in some ways, but also very different in a lot of ways. So I don't know how well that's going to go in his own head. I also don't know why the league would really not allow this, because I guess like to each their own, but I don't know why the league would want this as like a selling point. There's so much time for every other team to come up with a separate head coach. It's not like there aren't other quality coaches out there in the market wanting to coach a professional team, wanting to coach a women's professional team. The press release really doesn't answer any of those questions or concerns either. It just says that he knows what it takes to build and lead a high-performing team is what it says. And I mean, yeah, the Canadian national team did well for a while, but then it just very abruptly fell off a cliff. There were very few adjustments in the way that team played. There are very few young players, if any at all at this point. Like nobody in the college system, whether it's NCAA or U Sports, currently on the team, except maybe Eve Gascon, who is a goalie up and coming. But even then, she was left off this last Olympic roster for reasons unknown, because we saw the U.S. women's national team have like 7 or 8 NCAA players with them. So I really am unsure what the draw is there, considering what we saw happen with the Scepters. And granted, the team was built by Gina Kingsbury, so it's not like he had a hand in that necessarily, but we saw them really crash and burn at the end of the year here, just completely unable to score. They scored less than Boston, which if somebody had said that to any of us last year, we probably would have laughed in their face. Like, that sounds absurd that Toronto, of all teams, would score fewer goals in an entire season than the Boston team that was on paper. So, like, I don't understand it. We'll see how it goes. As far as if somehow, like, mistreatment comes up with players, that's I'm not too concerned about, because the PWHL PA, the Players Association, their union is there. Each team has a union representative. They can bring any of those types of concerns to them, and the union is literally there to help them out in that, and bring that to the league and address that in a more, not legal way, but kind of a legal way, like HR type thing. So I'm not entirely concerned there. But it's certainly an interesting move. There are some doom and gloomists out there who are worried about what a coach GM looks like to the outside hockey world, like whether it's professional looking or not. And I don't really put much stock in that. I think it may work for some organizations. It may not work for any. It remains to be seen what's going to happen in San Jose. If you want my personal opinion, I'm not going to be holding my breath. They're going to be my second team, but I am certainly not expecting them to do well. Even if they put together an all-star roster, we saw what can happen with those this year. I'm not a doomist, but I'm also not optimistic. So I'm going to wait and see how this goes before I really condemn Troy Ryan even more than I kind of already have. Over the last couple of weeks, the league has been rolling out the nominees for this year's awards, starting with Forward of the Year. The 3 finalists are Heidi, Jenner, and Panic. For defender, finalists are Jakes, Keller, and Wynn. Goalie, to no one's surprise, is Desbiens, Frankel, and Phillips. Coach, announced on the 22nd, were Chevry, McLeod, and Spar. Rookies have not been announced yet, nor has the regular season MVP finalist been announced yet. But let me give you my takes on the ones that have been, and then I'll give you my predictions and my assumptions for winners for those two. So forward of the year, I think it has to go to Kelly Panic. When you can sneeze and get a goal off of it, there's no serious competition here. Heidi was second in points behind Panic. Jenner was fourth, but as has been pointed out online, the third forward with the most points is Britta Curl, so I think they wanted to throw somebody in who was not a Frost player. Defender of the year, I'm not going to lie, I think Wynn was kind of a surprise to make it here. Obviously, she was fantastic, and I have loved having her on the fleet, but I don't know that I would have guessed her as the third finalist, but not complaining here. I think this could go two different ways. I think if we're going off of points, it's just Keller. If we're going off of points plus block shots, it's Sophie Jakes. If we're going off points plus blocked shots plus hits, it's Keller. I think if we're going off of just straight up vibes, it's the only way that Wynn really has a chance here, but I think it would still be Keller. I think Jakes generally had a great year, but she's just a more quiet player. She's not that she's not noticed and not noticeable, but I just think that she has less of a presence on the ice. She's also not captain, so that helps. Keller was just a bigger figure. She was more noticeable, obviously, for several reasons. She had a goal run to start the season, so I think the way that voting goes here, I think that that's probably going to be the factor that edges Keller out over Jakes, but either way, I'm not going to be surprised. The only one that would surprise me is if Wynn got Defender of the Year. Nothing against Wynn. Like I said, I love her, but I don't think that it's her. Goalie of the Year, my personal bias has to go with Frankel. I'm physically incapable of saying anybody else, but it really could be any of them. My guess is that if it's not Frankel, it's Anne-Renee Desbiens. I think Phillips has a decent claim for it, but I think she has a better claim on MVP than she does Goalie of the Year. So really between Desbiens and Frankel, in my opinion, like I said, my bias has me going for Frankel. Coach of the Year, I wrote these down before the finalists were announced. I said Chevry, McLeod, and Spar, and I was spot on. That's exactly who the nominees are. I am biased here, but taking a step back and looking at the season as a whole, including last year, including the offseason, if it doesn't go to Spar based off of more than just results, I think the fact that everybody went into the offseason last year not knowing who the Boston head coach was going to be and looking at the roster that we had, looking at the signings that were being made before the rookies got signed, nobody thought that the Fleet were going to be good. Nobody thought the Fleet were going to be even contending for a playoff spot. There was just no real belief in the team that we had. And yet Spar came in, whatever he did in the locker room brought a shutout win to start the season against Montreal, and then won 5 games in a row, and then just continued winning throughout the season. Like the record for the Boston Fleet this year in comparison to the record last year is night and day. There is no team that has had a bigger improvement season over season than the Boston Fleet. New York really had a go at it, but kind of fumbled it towards the end. But the Fleet really kept it up all the way into playoffs. Unfortunately, that's kind of where the luck ran out. But for a coach's first season with a team who on paper nobody really had as a contender, it has to be Spar. It has to be Spar. That's not to say that Chevry and McLeod were bad coaches, because they just straight up weren't. Chevry, as I said before, has learned over the years and adjusted. And yeah, obviously, this is the second year in a row that her team has finished first in the regular season. So obviously, that's a consideration. Considering the fact that Ottawa was fighting for the last playoff spot right up until the end, puts her behind the other two in my eyes, just automatically. Like the fact that, I mean, to be fair, these awards are all based off of the regular season. So whatever happened in playoffs is separate. But yeah, I think just the fact that McLeod had the runner-up team last year, like she did well. Like I don't want to say that she did bad at all, but I also don't think that she outcoached Spar or Chevry as a whole, looking holistically. The only reason that I think that she would be awarded this is if the voters took into consideration the fact that she was being treated for cancer, which it sounds horrible for me to say, but I don't think that should be a factor at all. Obviously, going through cancer treatments during the season is harrowing, and like it's so hard, and to do your job and to go through cancer treatments at the same time is difficult. And I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that the results based on coaching are separate from McLeod being treated for cancer. So I think if McLeod wins, that's like the only logical reason. Now that I sound like a jerk, let's move on to Rookie of the Year. The finalists have not been announced, but I'll take a crack at. My guess at the nominees would be obviously Hayley Wynn, the other two being Nicole Gosling and Casey O'Brien. This whole draft class was really impressive, though, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Kendall Cooper or Abby Newhook or Sarah Wisniewicz. I really wouldn't be surprised at all. But I think that in the end, it's going to be Hayley Wynn. She had fewer points than Casey O'Brien, but she's not a forward, so therefore not necessarily expected to put up that many points. Wynn overall was just the most consistent throughout the season, producing points as well as putting in the defensive numbers, blocking shots, a lot of intangible things. And I think that puts her above Casey O'Brien, who had more points in the regular season. Wynn was also getting an average of almost 27 minutes of ice time per night. So that shows that she is most trusted out of everybody and that she had the most opportunity to fail, and she just didn't. She just kept up such a high level, high standard for herself all season long, and that says a lot about a young person, a young player. For me, it has to be Wynn. The only nights that I think we saw her do poorly were the nights that her brothers were in attendance. So, first of all, they're not allowed to come back to Fleet games ever. But second of all, like 2 games out of a 30-game season is not statistically significant. Now, the regular season MVP or Billie Jean King award is more difficult, I think, than the Rookie of the Year conversation. Obviously, more people are eligible for it than Rookie of the Year, but I think it's also harder to say. The top of my list for finalists, I would have to put Phillips on the list. She wasn't the best goalie. She didn't have the best goalie stats in the league, as I said earlier. But I also said that she's stood on her head all season for a team whose defense was basically non-existent for over half the time. She carried them all the way into a playoff position. If that's not MVP material, I don't know what is. Likewise, I think Rebecca Leslie also has to be in the conversation. She didn't have the most points, but she had a ridiculous number compared to the rest of her team. And she tied for the most game-winning goals with Kelly Panic, and the only other player who had as many was Sarah Wisniewicz, and they all had 4 game winners. Waz, I would say, would have a crack at it if she had more overall points. I just think Leslie came out of left field, seemingly, in comparison to previous seasons, and in addition to Gwyneth Phillips, was a leading reason for the Charge to make it into playoffs. Other names that wouldn't surprise me to be a finalist are Coyne Schofield. She's always in the conversation. Sarah Fillier, despite the fact that the Sirens ended where they ended, I think Fillier certainly was the best on her team. Erin Frankel, once again, always has to be in the conversation. Brianne Jenner, I think, should be in there, and Megan Keller. That's my guess. We'll see who actually wins it. The last piece of big news this week came later on the 22nd, and it was a short and sweet press release that the Seattle Torrent and Steve O'Rourke agreed to quote-unquote part ways. The entire release is a total of 4 sentences long, so there's not many lines to read in between, but I think it's pretty clear when you do that Steve really was not good. He led the team to being eliminated first and then couldn't even pull them together enough for that first overall pick in the gold plan. To me, this sounds like he was fired and the parting of the ways was not necessarily mutual, but who knows? Who cares? I think the fact that he barely used his 2025 first-round draft pick, Buglioni, at all this season was just a microcosm of what was wrong with the team. I don't know that he knew how to play a lot of players. I don't know that he knew how to balance his team. They had similar defensive problems to what felt like more than half the league at this point. Honestly, some of the worst defense in the league, and that's not for lack of talent. So I don't think that this is a surprise to anybody, much less Torrent fans. This is probably for the best. I'll be interested to see who comes in next, whether we know the name or not. But yeah, that's the last piece of big news. And now, PWHL fans, we have a break. We have about 3 weeks of a break before we come back for the PWHL Awards on June 16th, and then the 2026 entry draft on the 17th, both up in Detroit. I will be back with a more brief draft preview, I think, maybe the week before. As always, I would like to remind you that I don't watch the NCAA, nor do I watch the European leagues or any other world leagues, so I am not an expert. I am just an idiot with a microphone who can read. So take my picks with a grain of salt. What did you all think about the finals series? What did you think about the MVP going to Poulin? What do you think about the expansion? What do you think about the awards? Who's going to win? Who's going to be nominated? And then finally, what do you think about the draft? Who do you think's going first overall? Is it Harvey? Is it Murphy? Is it going to be somebody we've never heard of? Let me know your thoughts. My email's always open. My DMs are always open. You can chat in the Discord with me. I'm in and out of there quite a bit. I want to give a shout out to those who have joined me on Patreon. I very much appreciate every single dollar that comes my way. It helps more than you know, and it means a lot to me that not only do you listen, but you want to support me monetarily. That is, I don't have words for it. I really appreciate it. And yeah, just thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. And to those who just listen, thank you. I really appreciate your support as well. To see so many people listening to my dumb voice whenever I happen to post, whether that's weekly or not, it just means a lot to me. Once again, I'm just an idiot with a microphone who loves women's hockey. So you could be anywhere else and you chose to spend your time with me. So that means a lot to me. Thank you so much. It's been so fun, so long to spend the season with you all. And I always love hearing from other fans what you think. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? I just love talking to you. I love talking hockey. This isn't goodbye for the off season, but we're right around the corner from it. So get some good naps in. Try to figure out what you're going to do with all of your free nights of the week. Maybe pick up a new hobby during the off season. Maybe go get some rollerblades and play some roller hockey outside. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you guys before the draft. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure that you're subscribed on your preferred platform. You can also follow me on social media. You can find it at IceEarnedPod pretty much everywhere. If you want to support the show monetarily, feel free to check out the merch store linked in the description below, or join us on Patreon at patreon.com/IceEarnPodcast. If you want to join the conversation on Discord, there is a link for that in the description as well. Shoot me an email at iceearnedpod@outlook.com. And until next time, be kind to each other.